Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome New York State Department of Health Commissioner Dr. Nariv Shaw. Please welcome New York State Department of Environmental Conservation Commissioner Joseph Martens. Welcome New York State Budget Director Robert Megna. Please welcome Director of State Operations Howard Glazer. Lieutenant Governor Robert Duffy. And please welcome the Governor of the State of New York, Governor Andrew Cuomo.
Good afternoon, everybody. On behalf of Governor Cuomo, I first want to thank you all for joining us today for the presentation of the 2014-2015 executive budget. This is Governor Cuomo's fourth budget presentation, and it's really incredible to think how far we've come in the last 4 years. 3 years ago, the governor inherited a $10 billion deficit. Our fiscal house was in disarray, and New York State government had not passed an on-time budget in years. The last 3 years in New York State have been nothing short of transformational. And many say that our success began with the passage of that first budget. Last year, we passed our third consecutive on-time budget, something the state has not done in 30 years, and this year we're shooting for our fourth, hint, hint. But our job is more than getting the budget passed on time. It's about creating a spending plan that truly works for the residents of the state of New York. That's the most important thing. And to pass the New York State budget meant out-of-control spending that benefited special interests and yielded very little results. And it's very safe to say that we're far beyond those days. The state government is now working. We're proud to say it's a functioning body that puts partisan politics aside for the good of all our constituents, and something that I see around the state, both houses, both sides of the aisle, working together, coming to agreements for what's best for the people of New York State. Working together as a team, we've reined in spending, we've cut waste, improved performances, and turned a $10 billion deficit into a $2 billion budget surplus. And that really requires, I think, a great round of applause for everybody. $10 billion deficit to $2 billion surplus. And today you get a chance to hear how we continue down this great path of prosperity. Today, the governor is going to highlight some of the important programs in the budget, and then we're going to hear from, first of all, after the governor, Budget Director Bob Megna, next followed by the Health Commissioner Dr. Nariv Shaw, next DEC Commissioner Joe Martens, and then the Director of State Operations Howard Glazer. And it's safe to say that the state has come a long ways in the last 3 years. In football vernacular with the Super Bowl, every great team has a great quarterback. And ladies and gentlemen, it's been a proud moment to work with this man for the last 3 years, to see what he has done. He has done great work in his state. He has put in incredible hours, incredible amounts of his time to make things happen. He really has created such a great change in the state. So please give a New York welcome to the great governor of the great state of New York, Governor Andrew Cuomo. Governor.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here today. First, let me begin by thanking and acknowledging probably the hardest working man and most effective working man in state government, Lieutenant Governor Robert Duffy. Let's give him a round of applause. We're joined by our great controller, Tom DiNapoli. Pleasure to be with you, Mr. Controller. Majority Leader Dean Skelos. Big round of applause for Majority Leader Dean Skelos. Majority Leader Jeff Klein. Pleasure to be with you, Jeff. Speaker Sheldon Silver. Welcome, sir. Democratic Conference Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins. Minority Leader Brian Cole. Pleasure to be with you, Brian. And my colleagues who are with me today, pleasure to be with you, gentlemen. Thank you for your work. Well, thank you. And it's an exciting part of the year. The state of the state was exciting, and now talking about the budget, we'll be adding some more facts and meat to the discussion. I'd like to start with taking half a step back before you do an exercise like this to remember what it's all about that we're trying to accomplish. And what we're trying to accomplish is provide the people of the state of New York with a government that performs efficiently and effectively for them, for the people, forges community, lowers taxes to provide relief and restore economic opportunity. That's everything we're trying to do in a very simple paragraph. The budget process is in many ways the seminal moment almost in any government. It's no surprise that Washington gridlocks when they go to do the budget. Why? Because that's where the money is, right? Why do you rob banks? That's where the money is. That's where the buck stops, or in the case of the budget, more accurately, that's where the buck actually starts. But that's where all the rhetoric strips away, and that's when it becomes very real in the budget, where you're putting the people's money. And our budget process in many ways followed that model and has been a metaphor for New York's past problems. And it's also been a metaphor for the success that we have had in reforming government. Over the past 30 years, 23 budgets have been late, an average of 50 days. Just think about that. That was the track record for state government. 30 years, 23 late budgets, and not a little late, 50 years. And then you wonder why the people of the state of New York thought that the government wasn't working. New York State government was gridlock on steroids, and the budget was manipulated by special interest pressure, which drove spending ever higher. Spending outpaced inflation for 50 years and outpaced income growth for 50 years. The spending transcended politics. During those 50 years, you had Democratic governors, you had Republican governors, you had Democratic senates, you had Republican senates, you had George Pataki, Mario Cuomo, Nelson Rockefeller. The spending remained the same. And it was a rate that was unsustainable. Think about this. If the state was spending at the same level of personal income growth, where we would be in 2010, $84 billion was the state budget, $45 billion as if we had stayed within personal income growth. Staying within personal income growth means raising the state budget at the same rate the people of the state were earning. So if you just spent what the people were making at the same rate, it would be a dramatically different situation. When you spend a lot of money, guess what? You have to raise taxes to pay for it. We raise taxes. At the same time, the investments we were making were not the most efficient, were not the most effective. It wasn't necessarily accomplishing a lot of things for the people of the state. You spend a lot of money and you get a lot done. That'd be one thing. We were spending a lot of money and not getting great results. And the net effect was we were seeing businesses and people actually leave the state. But that was yesterday. And this is today, and we are in a much different place. We've held spending below 2% for 3 years. We brought down the level of state debt at the same time. And we've gone from a $10 billion deficit to a $2 billion surplus. I don't know that I would have told you that was possible when we started this journey together. Let's give yourselves a round of applause for really a great piece of work. And the New York government works for the people and that actually performs for the people. New York created 380,000 jobs over the past 3 years, number 2 in the nation in creating jobs since the recession. Just think about that. Number 2 in the nation in creating jobs since the recession. And we made government work all across the board: teacher evaluation, economic development, road and bridge construction, an emergency management system that literally has been saving lives. We walked into a situation where all the arrows were pointed in the wrong direction. All the news was bad. We turned around the spending, we turned around the taxes, we turned around the employment, we turned around the jobs number, and we turned around the direction of the state of New York, thanks to your good work. Last year we said that if government works right, the budget is an easy process. It only gets traumatic when things go wrong. In the past, we've had a lot of trauma. Last year was simple and straightforward, and this year is relatively simple and straightforward. State operating budget will go up $1.5 billion, which is 1.7%, because we hold ourselves to a 2% limit. The all funds budget, which means the state budget plus federal funds, et cetera, without the Sandy aid and the Affordable Care Act, goes from $135 billion to $137. It goes up $1.8 billion for a 1.3% change. Main spending areas, spending overall goes up 1.7%. We raise Medicaid about 4%, and you'll see why it's about, which is about the personal income growth formula that we have put in the law for Medicaid. School aid goes up about 4%. The executive agencies are basically flat, 0.5%, but the executive agencies, we've done a lot of work with consolidation and streamlining, et cetera. The rest of the budget, basically flat, 0.2%. And then we have $500 million to invest in tax expenditures. That does not take into account in the education numbers a $2 billion Smart Schools initiative that we spoke about in the State of the State. But this year, the budget is more than just the budget. It's more than just dollars and cents, and it's more than even the one-year birthday of budget baby Leo Magna. The man makes a pretty budget, but he makes a prettier baby. And that baby looks like his mama, thankfully. This budget, I'm just kidding, Bob. I can see you all over that child's face. Anyway, this budget will enact a specific action agenda, more policies and more program development than in previous years, as you'll hear from my colleagues. Why? Well, the bad news is there'll be more work to get the budget passed, because this is more than just a budget document. It does a lot of program work. The good news is it will make the rest of the session simpler. So the budget does more work than normally. The good news is post-budget we'll actually have a better session. We started with a very simple process of a to-do list. What are the toughest problems facing the state? What are the structural problems facing the state? And then we've been checking them off. And the out-of-controlling spending, cut taxes and gridlock, redesign the state Medicaid program, pass pension reform, cap property taxes, enact real economic development, put in place teacher evaluation systems, and now tackle the proliferation and expense of local governments. We propose a property tax freeze. It is relief to homeowners, but it is also something else. It's an opportunity to fundamentally address the structural cause of high property taxes. The tax that is the main burden in this state is not the income tax. It is the property tax. We collect about $50 billion in property tax, about $40 billion in personal income tax. When you hear people complain, they complain about the property tax. Why is the property tax so high? Because we have too many levels of government, period. You don't need any calculator to figure this out. When you have as many levels of local government as we have, and you are supporting that many subdivisions, the cost is going to be high. So we want to freeze the property tax, number one, to provide relief to struggling homeowners, but number two, to incentivize consolidation and shared services. Homeowners will be eligible for a property tax freeze if, one, the local government stays within the 2% cap, so it is an incentive for the locality to stay within the cap. But number two, the local government implements an approved plan to save at least 1% a year for 3 years, and a total of a 3% reduction in cost. So what this really then lays out is a 5-year plan. Year 1, there'll be a freeze if the local government lives within the cap. Year 2, the state will credit to a freeze if the local government puts in a plan to save 1% per year for 3 years. And then year 3, they'd save 1%, year 2, 2%, year 4, 2%, year 5, 3%. These would be county-wide shared services or consolidation plans, which would save in the aggregate 1% per year of the total tax levy, not the operating budget, the total tax levy for 3 years. So for example, Erie County, 1,000 local governments in Erie County. 1,000. The total tax levy of those 1,044 governments in Erie County is $1.6 billion in tax levy. Again, not operating expense, doesn't include sales tax, et cetera. Just the property tax levy is $1.6 billion. You see the column of what the governments actually are, 427 lighting districts, 144 drainage districts. We say to the county executive, to the local government officials, sit down, come up with a plan, figure out shared services, figure out consolidations, figure out where you can find savings. It can't be that everyone has to do everything in every government. It can't be. It can be easier. It can be more politically advantageous, but it can't be that there are not economies of scale in that size universe of budding jurisdictions. Find a way to save 1% of the levy per year for 3 years. 1% would be 16 million. Savings over 3 years would be 48 million. Monroe County, 624 local governments. Interestingly, the same level of tax levy, $1.6 billion. Potential savings, 16 and 47. Oneida, 350 local governments, $349 million tax levy. This, my friends, is what's driving up the property taxes. And any level inflation in these numbers is devastating to a homeowner. Westchester County, #1 taxed county in the nation, Westchester County. Many of our counties are in the top 15 of the highest taxed counties in the nation. But Westchester's #1, 425 local governments, $4.4 billion in government services. Suffolk, 404, $5.7 billion. $57 million first-year savings, $171 million. The budget recognizes and believes that tax relief is an economic growth strategy that has been working for our state. Our tax package includes a corporate income tax cut from 7.1 to 6.5, a manufacturer's tax credit, a corporate income tax rate for upstate manufacturers for an additional incentive for upstate New York growth, a renter's tax credit, a circuit breaker property tax relief for low and middle income homeowners, and it freezes property taxes as we just discussed. Our tax package is not an advocacy statement. When you make a proposal about taxes, you get a whole range of opinions. It's one of those topics that everybody's an expert, and everybody has an opinion, and everybody has a perspective. So when you start talking about taxes, you get Republican theories and Democratic theories and liberal theories and conservative theories, and everyone's got a theory. And everyone criticizes the part of the package that they don't like. This is a balanced package. And it's not a package that has been put together to provoke. It's a package that has been put together to pass. It's a package that reflects the views of the Senate and the Assembly, of people who are upstate and downstate, business, labor, homeowners, and renters. We purposely put together the Pataki-McCall Tax Commission, former Governor George Pataki, former Controller Carl McCall, one a Republican, one Democrat. We put them together last year knowing that this year was an election year, and we wanted to come up with a very balanced package and a balanced approach. It's a package that works for all New Yorkers and a package that we can make a reality. Our jobs agenda goes forward with Global New York. We're very excited about the startup program, which is the most aggressive relief that you can bring, period. We want to start marketing startup zones internationally. We're excited about our jobs agenda and our regional startups. In the North Country, we have a number of economic development projects that we believe are going to spur the economy. Whiteface Mountain, Trudeau Institute Partnership, capital improvements at Order. Mohawk Valley, we're investing $180 million in Nano Utica, which is very exciting. It's our second major hub of nanotechnology. Capital Region, after talking about it for years and years and years, we're investing in a Albany Convention Center, $63 million. Finger Lakes, Rochester, we're investing $40 million in the Eastman Business Park, which has been a problem for the Rochester area, and we believe we're going to convert it into an asset. Western New York, the next step is a $100 million genome research center. In the southern tier, they've been talking about building a SUNY School of Pharmacology for many, many years. We want to make it a reality this year. In central New York, a $30 million for the Onondaga Lake Economic Revitalization Area, which is a very ambitious and exciting project to develop the side of the lake, Lake Onondaga. We also believe that the best long-term economic development strategy is the best education system. Common Core is an issue about which there has been a lot of dialogue, and I've heard a lot of feedback from parents. I think it's fair to say about Common Core that we all agree we need real standards for our students, a meaningful teacher evaluation system. I support the Common Core agenda. New York is one of 45 states to adopt Common Core, but the way the Common Core has been managed by the Board of Regents is flawed. There is too much uncertainty, confusion, and anxiety. Parents, students, and teachers need the best education reforms, which include Common Core and teacher evaluations, but they also need a rational system that is well administered. We will assemble a panel that includes education experts and members of the legislature. I think this is something we can work on together. Let's get recommendations for corrective action by the end of this session. Let's pass a package of corrective actions by the end of this session. And let's end the anxiety that the parents and teachers and students are feeling all across this state. We need testing to measure performance in the classroom, but too much testing can hurt, not help. There's no reason a school district should make a 5-year-old take standardized tests. It's not how our young children learn. I propose eliminating standardized testing for all students in K-2, and will ask our panel to review this proposal and make recommendations on this topic as well. The state has long believed in pre-K. The New York State Assembly championed it for years early on. The legislature passed it in 1997. And Governor George Pataki signed it into law. I called for the expansion of pre-K last year in the state, and the budget implemented it. This year, let's take it another step forward. This year, we propose universal full-day pre-K statewide, period. All the educators will tell you this is the single most advantageous reform that a state can make. That the younger you get children into school, the more open and accessible their brain, the more they can take in earlier. Incredibly, New York will become just the 4th state in the nation to offer statewide universal full-day pre-K. First question we have to answer is, what is universal full-day pre-K? Because pre-K currently varies widely across the state. In some school districts, it's a little bit more than babysitting. Some school districts have very comprehensive learning programs. Study after study shows it's not just enough to say we'll do pre-K. You have to spend the money right, and you have to spend the money with the appropriate program. First, we'll review the current state standards and teacher requirements to ensure that we are providing high-quality pre-K programs around the state. Second question will be, how do you pay for it? The state will pay for it, and the state will be proud to pay for it. It's a priority. We believe in children. We believe in pre-K. We believe in education. Let's put our money where our mouth is, and let's make it a reality. This budget includes a fully funded 5-year plan to cover the additional cost of full-day pre-K across the state. We currently estimate the cost at about $1.5 billion over the next 5 years. We will work with school districts to develop an implementation schedule, and the state will move as fast as the district will move. As a matter of fact, we're going to encourage districts to move quickly, because getting to full-day pre-K in most districts across the state is going to be a capacity issue. It's not that they don't want to do it, it's they don't have the capacity to do it. They need classrooms, they need not-for-profit organizations that can do it off-site, they need teachers, they need facilities, they have to build. So it becomes a governmental chore of developing the capacity. We want to encourage the districts to perform. We want to encourage the districts to perform quickly, and our saying to the districts will be, as fast as you can move, we can move. We have the funding. We want it to come online as fast as you can bring it online. Charter schools will be eligible for pre-K funding. We'll also re-examine the pre-K inspections, regulations, construction codes, and facility requirements, because we just don't want to do pre-K. We want to do it great, and we will. We also want to invest in after-school. Studies show that high-quality after-school programs make a real difference. Our budget proposes a fully funded 5-year plan to implement a robust after-school program statewide. Once again, we'll negotiate district by district. Each district has a different need, a different desire, and a different capacity. To transform our classrooms, the budget puts the $2 billion Smart Schools Initiative on the ballot. It would have to be voted on this November. It's something I support. It's something I'll work very hard to get passed, and it's something I believe the people of the state of New York will pass, especially if they know the money is going to be well spent and the money is going to be directed to the right causes. The eligible use for the funds, high-speed broadband, smart boards, tablet computers, also construction of new pre-K classrooms and school program space for after school as needed. So this initiative will work hand in glove with the pre-K and with the after-school programs, because to the extent schools are going to have to develop more capacity, they can use the $2 billion initiative to actually fund that capacity. So the two will work together very well. The budget continues to incentivize teacher performance with $20 million for a Teacher Excellence Fund. The budget also has $8 million for the full scholarships for SUNY or CUNY college or university for the top 10% of graduates in high school. Overall, the education investment is done on a 2-year basis. The 2-year projected formula growth equals 7%. As you know, we have our education budget is dictated by a personal income growth formula. This year, the personal income growth formula is 3.1%. Next year, it's 3.9%. Over 2 years, it's roughly 7%. Our 2-year budget is $1.3 billion in general support, $75 million for the performance programs. That's the additional P-TECH programs. That's the teacher bonus that I just spoke about. $460 million on top of that for pre-K and after school over the first 2 years. That budget ramps up very quickly as the capacity goes online, and that budget goes to $2.2 billion over 5 years. So that's a significant investment, and that's why I'm confident in saying the state will move as fast as any district will move. As fast as they can develop capacity is as fast as we can fund it. That adds up to $1.8 billion, which is 8.6% over 2 years. That compares to the 7% over 2 years if we had stayed to the formula. So roughly the formula for this year is 3.1. We would be roughly at about 4.3. So we're exceeding the formula. That's without counting the $2 billion School Bond Act, which we suggest would be distributed the same way the education aid is ultimately distributed. So overall, if you counted it all, it'd be one of the largest investments in education that this state has made, and we're proud of that. Healthcare, New York State has gone from a symbol of waste and inefficiency to a model of reform and innovation. Our healthcare exchange has signed up 330,000 New Yorkers. It is one of the best operating sites in the country. Let's give them a round of applause, Dr. Shaw. Our Medicaid redesign team, which we started in the first year, is a great success. We're providing more and better health care at less cost. We actually brought the cost of Medicaid down, and enrolled more people at the same time. We've saved $34 billion. $17 billion for the state, $17 billion for the federal government. In 2012, we requested from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, HHS, what's called a $10 billion federal Medicaid waiver, which is an approval to spend some of the money we save to continue our reforms to improve health care and implement our new system. The way these waivers work, it's a funny use of the term, but the way the waiver works is a state saves money by making changes. The federal government gives the state back some of that money, some of the savings, so they can implement the new system. We requested a $10 billion waiver back in 2012 because we have challenges. We're converting the system, and we're making serious changes in the system, but we need funding to enact those changes that are allowing us to save the money in the first place. Our most serious situation is in Brooklyn, where we have Brookdale Interfaith Medical Center, Long Island College Hospital. We have been propping up the system, frankly, for about 18 months while we've been waiting for the waiver, but we need HHS to act on the waiver now. It is a critical situation. We have no alternative. The numbers are beyond the scope of the state government, and this is truly a crisis in a place called Brooklyn, but we want our federal friends to understand that Brooklyn has more people in it than San Francisco, Boston, Washington, D.C. combined. So this is a serious situation affecting a lot of people. You'll hear more from Dr. Shaw about it, but it's a critical matter for us to attend to this year because this budget does not have resources to keep these hospitals open without this Medicaid waiver. Providing help to local governments. We've been very aggressive in mandate relief and literally taking costs from local governments. The Affordable Care Act, Medicaid takeover, where we assume all the increase in Medicaid, pension reform, early intervention reforms, $4.6 billion in total, probably the most aggressive local mandate package in modern political history. This year we'll do even more with preschool special ed reforms and data sharing of law enforcement with localities. We have a $100 million affordable housing program. We have a very robust emergency services recreation program, which is very important. You'll hear from Howard Glazer. We've had about 9 federally declared disasters since I became governor. That's about 1 every 3 or 4 months. As a matter of fact, after this, we'll be declaring a state of emergency in downstate New York because of the snowstorm. We have to be prepared for these storms. And if you're not prepared, people will die. It is that simple. So investing in this technology and this equipment is very important. We also have a number of initiatives to make New York fairer. We want to continue to build on the MWB program, where we've had great success, meeting our goal of 20%, funding for our reentry council to stop the revolving door in our criminal justice system, the New York Works tax credit program that attacks unemployment for minority youth in urban settings, and $250,000 for expert services on the Raise the Age. That's 16 and 17-year-olds who were tried as adults in the state of New York. We're also requesting $250,000 to do a disparity study to see if we can get the disabled veterans in our state a set aside on government contracts, so we show them the same loyalty that they have shown to us. And $2.5 million for the Route 98 feasibility study. This is a roadway that the North Country has talked about for a long time. Different people have different opinions as to whether or not it will work. Let's spend the money, let's do the study, and let's find out if it works, because if it does, it could make a tremendous difference for the North Country. Last year, I proposed a Public Trust Act. I understand this legislature still does not agree with the act. I've included it in this budget. It has reforms to the Board of Elections to institute independent enforcement and real oversight. It establishes new anti-bribery and corruption laws, and it requires disclosure of outside clients with business before the state. With this budget, I'm also proposing a public financing system, because I think it's inarguable, but that the amount of money in politics has created a number of difficult issues. There has also been a long and troubling pattern of incidents of sexual harassment, particularly in the New York State Assembly. It goes back a long time, and it seems like it just doesn't stop. What makes it worse is there have been complaints that people didn't know where to go, and they didn't know how to make their voice heard. And there have been complaints that people felt that not only were they being victimized, but there was no recourse. That has to stop, and it has to stop once and for all. I propose in this budget, J. Cope should have a confidential hotline for complaints of sexual harassment. We hope and pray that it stops, and it stops today, but if it doesn't stop, the victim needs a place to go, and that's what this confidential hotline would do for them. We've included ethics reform in the budget because hope springs eternal. I'm an optimist. You have to be to do this job, trust me, and because it is the right thing to do. And in closing, let me say this. Government, to me, there's a formula. The capacity of government is its competence times the level of trust. Government capacity times the level of trust. The competence of our state government is inarguable. Lieutenant Governor started with the football analogy. I was watching the playoffs this weekend, the Denver Broncos and the New England Patriots, and two great teams, and they were talking about the great teams, and they were basically saying that they're playing for the record books. They're playing for the history books. The record has been that good. You passed 3 budgets on time, first time in 30 years. I don't want to jinx us, but I asked, when was the last time 4 budgets were passed in a row? Last time 4 budgets were passed in a row, 1973. Governor was Nelson Rockefeller. Speaker was Perry Duryea. Senate Leader Earl Bridges. They're all gone now. 41 years. Many of the people in this body weren't even alive 41 years ago. That's how long it has been. And it's not just that we passed 3 budgets in a row. This government performed remarkably well for the people of the state of New York. When you go home and explain to your constituents what you did, it is truly remarkable. 3 years, $10 billion deficit turned to a surplus, jobs are up, spending's down, unemployment is down in every region of the state of New York. And the sense of pride is up. The sense of pride is up. You go to communities that were long depressed, go to Buffalo. And Buffalo, which was depressed literally for decades and generations, and there is a sense of energy and hope and optimism that you feel on the street. And this was a community that thought they had no future. This is a community that spent generation after generation of seeing people leave. You go to the North Country, that felt abandoned and isolated. They weren't even part of New York. They weren't even relating to Albany. And it is a different feel. It's not just that we passed 3 budgets. And it's not just when you look at the statistics, you turn the state around. You turned around the feeling. You turned around the energy. You turned around the culture. And people are believing in New York. The one omission is ethics. And it's the one negative they hear over and over and over because it's a drip, drip, drip of these negative one-off stories. And it has to be addressed. Because what ethics reform says to the people of the state is, I get it. I get that that's wrong. And that's not me. And I don't tolerate it. And we're going to put a system in place that makes sure if and when these things happen again, there'll be a system to take care of it. Nobody expects that we can stop people from doing silly or venial or stupid or mean things. It's human nature. But they are saying, we want to make sure that you have a zero tolerance policy and that you are offended by it and that the victims have a place to go and that you won't allow it in your midst. And ethics reform is that new system. That's what ethics reform is to me. And I do believe it affects our capacity. And we need the capacity. Because this year for us is going to be a banner year. It should be a banner year. Building on success, we've had a great 3 years. We're building on that in this 4th year. And we are swinging for the fences in the 4th year. You look at this agenda and what we want to do, it's historic. We're going to do more construction in this state than we've done in over 60 years. A new emergency management system for a new generation to save lives. A new resiliency program that the Vice President of the United States said he's never seen before. Economic development projects all across the state that are coming out of the ground. New records in road and bridge construction. A technology revolution in the schools with this $2 billion initiative. Teacher evaluations are now kicking in. It's all coming together. It's all coming together. The tourism numbers are up. You can feel it. And we're going to bring it home this session. And I believe we're going to have a session that goes into the record books. And that's why that capacity is so, so important. Because we are doing what we came here to do. You all went into public service, and you get in the car and you drive a long distance to come here for one very simple reason. Because public service said, maybe you have the opportunity to make a difference in society. Maybe you can take your talents and your God-given gifts and they can have an impact beyond yourself. And maybe you can take your talents and make your community better and make life better for your children and for your family, and you can leave this place a better place. We are doing that. We are doing that. We have done that. And we can do that even more. And that's what this session is going to prove. I'm looking forward to it. I'm proud to have you as colleagues. Let's do what the people of this state need done. Thank you, and God bless you.
So I don't know who thought it was a good idea for me to follow that, but I have been doing budgets for a long time, and in the process of doing those budgets, I was usually up day and night for weeks before the budget came out, and the depressing part was being involved with putting budgets out that weren't always of the highest quality. And so what's changed since the governor's been in office is we've really put out very clear, very concise, very easy to understand budgets that present the governor's priorities about what he wants to accomplish. So now I stay up day and night, weeks before, trying to figure out how to get pictures of my son in his presentation. Let me elaborate on a few things that the governor talked about, especially creating economic opportunity. One of the things that we're very proud of is our adherence to the 2% spending cap, as well as the ability of the economy to recover under the policies that we've been operating under has resulted in surpluses that will accrue over the next 3 years. And this is going to provide the opportunity to do the tax reductions and the other programmatic initiatives that the governor talked about. This JAWS chart used to be the other way, by the way. We used to call it a JAWS chart. And of course, the spending used to be in front of the revenues, and now that situation has been reversed. For decades, we spent a little faster and than income, and that sometimes seemed like a small difference. And this was in the governor's presentation. Maybe only a percentage difference between how fast income was growing and how fast spending was growing. Spending was growing a little bit faster. But if you went back to 1960 and we grew at the average rate of income growth over the period from 1960 till today, we would have saved $40 billion. Our budget would be $40 billion less than it is today. That's just a percentage difference. And that shows you it's the long-term fiscal capacity that's important, and the policies that have been put in place over the past 3 years get us to this point where 10 and 20 years from now, we'll be in a significantly better fiscal position. The Pataki-McCall Commission proposed a series of tax reductions. These tax cuts will provide significant relief over the next 5 years. Importantly, the corporate tax rate cut will be top corporate tax rate will be cut from 7.1 to 6.5%. This will provide in cumulative $900 million of tax relief over the next 3 years. The manufacturer's tax credit, which is a refundable credit for manufacturers who are actually making something in New York for the property they're using to make things in New York, will provide $400 million of tax relief over the financial plan period. The upstate manufacturing tax rate will be reduced to 0. This will provide $100 million in relief over the next 3 years. We will eliminate and accelerate the phase out of the 18A tax surcharge, utility surcharge. We'll completely eliminate it for industrial users, and we will phase it out faster for residential customers and other commercial users. The governor talked about the 2-year property tax freeze for homeowners. This will provide almost $2 billion of relief over the next 3 years. The freeze is eligible only to homeowners living within localities that adhere to the cap, the 2% cap, and in the second year, reduce costs by providing a consolidation plan consistent with how the governor described it. The circuit breaker will be available and will phase in as the tax freeze phases out. The circuit breaker will phase in for households under $200,000. It provides, again, close to $2 billion in tax relief over a 3-year period, and it attempts to target the results to those taxpayers where property tax is the largest burden as a percentage of their income. The renter's tax credit is established for households below $100,000 in income and is targeted to those families with children, and it will provide, again, a cumulative benefit of $1 billion over the next 3 years. The estate tax reform, or the move to die tax, New York is one of 15 states in the country that still has an estate tax, but worse than that, we have one of the lowest exemption thresholds in the country at $1 million. Over the next 3 to 4 years, we'll move that threshold up to the federal threshold of $5,250,000, and we will lower the top rate from 16% to 10%. Combined, businesses will save over $2 billion from this plan through the corporate reductions and the elimination and phase out of the 18A surcharge, and households will save close to $6 billion from the combined impact of the proposals in the executive budget. In addition to the Pataki-McCall Commission, the governor appointed a tax simplification commission with Peter Solomon and Carl McCall as the co-chairs, and the budget acts on many of their recommendations to simplify the tax code and eliminate many nuisance taxes. We finally, after 30 years, raised the income threshold required to file taxes in New York State, which eliminates the need for over 250,000 New Yorkers from filing a return when they don't need to. We repeal nuisance taxes that raise little revenue, the personal add-on minimum tax, the boxing and wrestling admissions tax, the tax on agricultural cooperatives are all eliminated. There's also strategic economic development investments. The budget continues bottom-up regional approach that the governor has spearheaded since he's been in office. REDC's round 4 includes an additional $150 million in new economic development capital funding and $70 million in state tax credits for regional priority projects. This year, the state will continue to assist localities in reducing costs because governments that cost less can tax less. The phase-out of local Medicaid expense growth continues. The phase-out where we started, where locals contributed 3% of growth towards Medicaid, we're getting to 0%. This provides $1.2 billion in local savings over the first 5 years. Tier 6 pension reform will save almost $1 billion in its first 5 years of implementation, but will save close to $70 billion over 30 years as the workforce turns over. The Affordable Care Act, this is a hidden gem that not a lot of people talk about, will provide significant relief for local governments. We believe over the next 5 years, the Affordable Care Act will save local governments $2.4 billion, $1.7 billion for New York City, and $720 million for the counties. Preschool special education program costs are growing at unsustainable rates, 9% average growth in New York City for the past decade. These reforms will save counties and New York City $71 million through 2019. The budget implements the New York State Protection Cloud, which helps law enforcement fight crime, but also saves $12 million in annual local costs because they don't have to build their own cloud and can make use of the New York State system. Budget aid to local governments, the AIM program stays at $715 million. Financial Restructuring Board grants will be $80 million and $39 million in consolidation grants and restructuring grants. The budget includes additional measures to help reduce costs for New Yorkers. Title insurance has become a costly requirement for anyone either buying or refinancing a mortgage. The budget improves regulations to reduce costs. We believe that we can save new purchasers 20% of average costs, $360 upstate, $800 downstate, and on refinancings, $400 upstate and $1,800 downstate. Auto insurance fraud has made auto insurance rates escalate. The increase of insurance is felt by every car owner. This budget includes reforms to curb no-fault insurance fraud aimed at lowering premiums from $150 to $200. The budget also establishes a student protection unit to serve as a consumer watchdog for students, help students make financially sound decisions, protect students from financial fraud, investigate student loan abuses, and monitor student health insurance plans. Thank you.
Over the past 3 years, we've really transformed the state's Medicaid system. New York used to have a Medicaid problem. Spending was growing at double-digit percentages. What was worse, we were ranked 22nd nationally in terms of the quality of care and dead last in avoidable hospital use. It was the classic New York State government story. Spend more than anyone else, yet lag behind in results. And for years, attempts at reform failed because of the political culture and state government dysfunction. We took a new approach, a Medicaid redesign team that brought together everyone to the same table to figure out how to improve patient care, expand access while cutting costs. Today, the MRT is working for Medicaid recipients. Over 1 million New Yorkers are getting high-quality primary care, and teams of providers are working together to care for Medicaid's most needy patients. This means that people with diabetes, hypertension, mental illness, and other chronic conditions are living healthier lives in the community, not in the hospital. The MRT is working for taxpayers. We capped spending and reduced costs by 6%, despite enrollment increasing by 10%. But we still have lots more to do to improve health care and make New York the healthiest state in the nation. This budget makes substantial new investments to enhance health care delivery in New York. The budget provides $1.2 billion of capital funding for hospitals, clinics, and long-term care facilities. This budget includes $70 million over 5 years to fund community-driven regional health planning to replicate the great success we've seen in Rochester with the Finger Lakes Health Systems Agency. This budget also provides over $65 million to establish a statewide electronic medical record system and additional technology solutions that will help improve quality while reducing costs. This budget enacts reforms to help New Yorkers avoid unexpected and unavoidable out-of-network surprise healthcare costs that often mean tens of thousands of dollars in medical bills. These investments demonstrate that the Empire State is doing its part. But to transform failing hospitals, expand primary care, and get the right mix of community-based services, the federal government needs to approve the $10 billion Medicaid waiver we submitted 18 months ago. You know, California requested a $10 billion waiver, and theirs was approved in 6 months. Texas requested a $10 billion waiver. Theirs was approved in 5 months. And New York, with our $10 billion waiver, well, we're still waiting. As the governor said, nearly half of New York's 227 hospitals are financially distressed. On average, the financial condition of our hospitals is 47th in the nation. Upstate, vital health care services in the North Country are at risk. Lakeshore Hospital in Chautauqua County and St. Francis in Poughkeepsie are on the verge of financial ruin. Yet the biggest problem is in Brooklyn, where 8 hospitals are fiscally distressed, including 3 that are at risk of closing. The reality is this: If the federal government continues to delay our waiver, hospitals in Brooklyn and statewide will close very soon. But that's not all. You heard the great story of our health exchange enrolling over 330,000 people, and we expect 1 million to sign up within 3 years. But these New Yorkers will expect access to health care services. But without that $10 billion Medicaid waiver, the promise of health reform will be unfulfilled because community-based providers will not be available, or the wait for care will be simply too long. It's a simple fact. The unreasonable delays endangering New York's entire healthcare system, not only for hospitals in Brooklyn, but throughout the state. We have made great progress making New York State healthier. This budget builds on our success. We will continue to control costs while improving the quality of care. We will continue to run the most successful health insurance exchange in the nation. We will enable regionally driven solutions to healthcare challenges. And we will, in partnership with the federal government, ensure access to vital healthcare services throughout the state. I'm coming today to you as your health commissioner, but also as a doctor. And as a doctor, I can tell you that this health budget, more than any time in the past, does more to care for and protect New Yorkers. And together, we can work together to make New Yorkers healthier, live longer, and live more productive lives. Thank you.
The executive budget continues the state's investment in protecting New York's environment and making the state a cleaner and greener place for all our residents and visitors to enjoy. The Environmental Protection Funds sustained years of cuts and sweeps. Last year, for its 20th anniversary, we increased the funding substantially to the EPF. This budget reaffirms our commitment with a $157 million appropriation. The budget also includes $40 million of New York Works capital funds for a host of environmental infrastructure needs at DEC. Our state park system, led by Commissioner Rose Harvey, is a national treasure and entertains nearly $60 million visitors a year. The budget includes $90 million through New York Works to continue improving our parks. Since 2011, we have opened tens of thousands of acres of land to the public, from the Essex chain of lakes in the Adirondack Park to boating access in Peconic Bay. Outdoor recreation pumps $9 billion annually into the state's economy, and we're going to invest in projects that will make this number grow. The budget provides $6 million to make state-owned properties, 50 of them, accessible for hunting, fishing, boating, and wildlife watching. These include projects at Rocky Point Natural Resource Management Area in Suffolk County, Stewart State Forest in Orange County, Looking Glass Pond in Schoharie, Meacham Lake Campground in Franklin County, the Black River Wild Forest in Herkimer, and Spicer Creek Wildlife Management Area in Erie County. The budget builds on our New York Open for Hunting and Fishing effort, including measures to reduce costs for hunters and anglers and promote tourism. The budget invests $4 million for improvements to the state's 11 fish hatcheries, introduces a promotional price days for sporting licenses and additional free fishing days, creates discounted 3- and 5-year sporting licenses, reduces the price of 7-day fishing licenses, and authorizes crossbow hunting. A critical part of DEC's mission is cleaning up contaminated land and water to protect public health, remove barriers to redevelopment, and put properties back into productive use. The Brownfields Cleanup Program expires in 2015. We've cleaned up more than 150 sites since the beginning of this program, but even with the 2008 reforms, the tax credits are simply too expensive and not limited to sites that need incentives for redevelopment. Our Brownfields reforms will focus incentives on sites which need them or are priority economic development projects. They'll provide bonus credits for projects that create affordable housing or are in blighted urban areas. They'll simplify the program, and they'll extend it for 10 years. The budget also provides $100 million to extend State Superfund, our flagship remediation program, to ensure that the state's most contaminated sites are cleaned up. This includes $10 million to help clean up municipally owned brownfields so that they can be put back into productive use and back on the tax rolls. New York State has reduced the cap on carbon dioxide emissions in the regional greenhouse gas program by 45%. Richard Kaufman, the chair at NYSERDA, will invest these auction proceeds in a whole variety of programs to support a cleaner New York, including the New York Green Bank, Cleaner Greener Community Program, Renewable Heat New York, and New York Sun. The budget also includes $9.4 million, as the governor noted, for the Olympic Regional Development Authority for infrastructure improvements. And just in time, the winter tourism season is upon us, and we'd like to invite you to a mid-February visit to Orta's Olympic facilities in Lake Placid and Wilmington for hiking, skiing, snowmobiling, and more. Now, several of your colleagues got a jump on winter recreation this year, but insisted that their identities be concealed because they knew you'd be jealous. I'm offering a special prize, and you can see me after today's budget presentation, to anyone who can guess their identities. And I'm going to give you one hint. One of them's the governor. That summarizes the Environment and Parks executive budget for 2014-15. Thank you for your attention.
All right, we're in the home stretch here. In the 3 years the governor has been in office, we have had 9 federally declared disasters, as the governor mentioned. That's an average of one almost every 4 months. As the governor has noted previously, extreme weather is the new reality in New York State. The destructiveness of Sandy, Irene, Lee really brought that home to us and requires us to think about storm preparation in a whole new way, because we know these events are going to continue. Our plan includes an across-the-board overhaul of every aspect of our critical systems, our infrastructure, our response capabilities to prepare for the new reality. Now, the good news is that the governor has had tremendous success in fighting for federal resources in Washington to implement that vision. Our plan to build back better relies on $16 billion in federal funding. And the better news is that the state funds portion of that plan is $26 million. $26 million leveraging $16 billion. Bob, if you can leverage that kind of money throughout the federal fund surplus, you're going to be drowning in surpluses, which is great news. Let me take you through just a few highlights of what this program does, and this really just covers a few of the highlights. The rest is on the website. Our current weather detection system in New York is inadequate. We have 27 weather stations that the National Weather Service uses, far too few for a state of our size. Some of them are almost 100 miles apart. And the technology is probably not much better than what you used in high school science. As a result, weather information comes too late. It's often inaccurate. So we'll spend $18.7 million to create the nation's most advanced weather system, covering every county in the state, with real-time, accurate, early detection of dangerous weather. And early warning will save lives and will protect property. Our transportation system throughout the state was hit hard by these storms. Nowhere more so than the subway system, where every aspect was impacted. The subway system was constructed over 110 years ago, the early parts of it, and it wasn't meant to mix with salt water. You remember the pictures of subway tunnels, automobile tunnels, completely flooded. Well, today the MTA is undertaking the most extensive reconstruction of the entire system, historically $5 billion. The real focus is on building back better to prepare for future storms. For example, devising a unique system to seal each and every one of the 540 openings in Lower Manhattan alone. That picture is an example of some of the innovative technology the MTA is looking at. It's actually an inflatable plug that can be placed into a subway or automobile tunnel to protect it from flooding. Metro North is especially vulnerable in emergencies. Every single Metro North rider crosses over that bridge to get into Manhattan. That's the Harlem Lift Bridge. And when it's out, as it was a few years ago with that fire, Every one of those 280,000 riders that use the system a day are stranded, and Grand Central is shut down. We plan to invest $1 billion in federal funds in a new Metro North spur with direct access to Penn Station, and it adds 4 new stations in the Bronx, areas traditionally underserved by transit options. You can see them on the map. Co-op City, Morris Park, Parkchester, and Hunts Point would receive new stations. Our bridges, especially upstate, are especially vulnerable to floodwaters. Many of the bridges upstate are built to older standards. This is Windham, New York. That's a house crashing into the bridge. While no bridge was made to that standard, upstate bridges are particularly vulnerable to scour. That's running water under the bridge over and over again, undermining the foundations. And that's the new reality in upstate New York. We will rebuild and substantially replace more than 100 bridges upstate with state-of-the-art flood-resistant construction. You can see some of them here. We'll post them on the website today, but they're all through the state. There's a bunch of them all over, as you can see. Now, we built critical infrastructure all along our waterways, and we really are a coastal state, particularly wastewater treatment plants that empty out into the waterways with treated water. We built them at vulnerable locations. That's the Bergen Point plant in Suffolk County. It was actually undamaged from Hurricane Sandy, but many other plants were damaged. 10 billion gallons of sewage flowed into regional waterways. Our plan is $1.6 billion in water system improvements, dikes, levees, movable walls, and we'll bring these water treatment plants up to a 500-year storm level to protect them to that degree. Now, not only our infrastructure, but our people are located on the coasts and on inland waterways. 90% of our population lives near the water. Some of those places are very difficult, if not impossible, to protect. Some communities like Oakwood Beach are voluntarily relocating, and we're buying out those homeowners because they're so close to the shore. 321 homes at a cost of $160 million, returning that area to a natural buffer. Maritime forest, breakwater reefs, tidal wetlands, that protects the inland neighborhoods while returning the area of the buffer to its natural waterfront and providing public access. That's a $165 million project, but it's one of dozens of protections across the state, including upstate New York, with flood warning control along the Erie Canal. That's a total of $2 billion in flood protection and coastal protection for New Yorkers throughout the state. Now, we have the most outstanding first responders in New York, and we saw that through Irene, we saw that through Lee, we saw that through Sandy especially. And we've taken additional steps over the last 2 years to strengthen our emergency preparedness. The governor began the nation's first Resiliency Institute, underway now at SUNY, NYU, and Cornell, brings together the best minds in the state and the country with government, with first responders, with academia, to plan the kinds of things that we're talking about here today. We launched the first ever emergency management certification system to give our first responders the training that they deserve to do the jobs that they do. And we were the first state in the nation to establish a strategic fuel reserve. So we've done a lot. We have to do more. We'll take additional steps in the coming year. The governor mentioned it earlier. We'll create the first in the nation College of Emergency Preparedness and Homeland Security with $15 million in this year's budget. We've also begun to implement the most extensive backup power system for gas stations. We started downstate, primarily in the metropolitan area. This year, we'll propose $3.1 million to extend the program to cover all gas stations within a half mile of critical highways and evacuation routes upstate. Those are the major routes that would be covered. Lastly, our citizens are, in many cases, their own first responder. First person on the scene in most emergencies is a neighbor, is an ordinary citizen. To help our citizens be the best trained, the best prepared in the country, we'll begin a Citizen First Responder Corps. Training will begin in just a couple of weeks. We have $3 million in the budget to do that. This is just a high-level overview of our plans. We presented the full plan to Vice President Biden. He came to Albany in the Red Room 2 weeks ago to receive the plan. He gave us the administration's full support. And with that federal support and with the governor's vision to not just build back, but build back better, New York will be the best in the nation in safeguarding our infrastructure, preserving our environment, and protecting our people. And with that, turn it back to Lieutenant Governor Duffy.
On behalf of Governor Cuomo, I want to thank you all for coming. That concludes today's budget presentation. And again, looking forward to a great, successful year. Thanks so much.
Why can't they put